Hey,
Are you having issues trying to record it?
I just got it. Just put it on.
Okay.
Thanks for checking.
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, so let's keep moving here. All right, so letting your coach know, make sure the house is still available, call the listing agent. We went through that. On the MLS, there'll a lot of times be documents attached to the listing. So when you're on the MLS, if you haven't already, sometimes at that point you've already looked at these documents, but if you haven't, look on Bright MLS, and it's like right near where the price is. There's like a little document symbol. If you click on that symbol, sometimes there's a attached documents that the listing agent has attached. Like some popular ones would be the seller's disclosure. A lot of times is put on there, so you could download that seller's disclosure right from Bright. Sometimes they'll have utility information, like how much they pay for heat, electric, water, things like that. So that information's there. Some agents have instructions on how they want your offer to be presented. They usually call it a presentation of offers. So they'll say, hey, when you submit an offer to me, make sure you're including this and this and that. So that'll be on there too. So just make sure you just double check there. Let's see here. We went through most of that about asking questions. Is the seller in town or readily available? Why would that be important? To know if the seller's in town and available. Anyone can chime in.
To review the offers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To review the offers, and that way too, like, how soon, could it be done,
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, Dan, for chiming in. So we'll get to the part in the offer where, you're supposed to put a timeline, how long the offer is good for. Well, if you put a timeline of 24 hours, but the seller is, I don't know, in the Amazon jungle, doing something down there, and he can't get to the offer for 48 hours, like, well, you're setting bad expectations with your client, because your client, a lot of times they will ask you, if they don't know, they're going to say, hey, Lewis, like, so how's this work? Like, when can we expect to hear back? Well, if you're like, oh yeah, I think we should probably hear back tonight, but you didn't ask that question, hey, is the seller even available? Like, when or where are they? And it's like 3 days before you get an answer, then your buyer's going to be very anxious and bothering you every day, like, oh my gosh, did you hear anything yet? Did you hear anything yet? But if you set that expectation up front, like, hey, I talked to the agent, the listing agent, and the seller is down walking around in the Amazon jungle, and he won't be able to look at the offer for 2 days, then at least they know, they have that expectation set. So just ask, what's the situation with the seller, and are they available to review it pretty quickly?
Hey, Lewis, I have a question. This
Please.
is Joyce. Hi.
Hey, Joyce.
Hi. In terms of time frames, so if your buyer is interested in the property, wants to make an offer, are you assuming also that there might be other offers going there? I'm just worried about time frames, like if this is on the weekend and things like that. So is it usually like they have it within 6 hours or 24 hours? How does that work out? Because as a new agent, it'll just take a little bit longer to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, typically, so you're right. I mean, if it's a multiple offer situation, I mean, you're pretty much working on the listing agent's timetable. Like, if they have a set, time, they say, hey, Joyce, I have 3 offers, and I'm gonna be presenting to the seller tomorrow at lunchtime, then that's your timetable there. I mean, he gave you the timetable because he or she is pretty much running the show because they got multiple offers. If it's not a multiple offer situation, like, then it kind of falls on you to try to make up your own timetable to put on the seller and the listing agent. So at that point, it depends on the situation. Like, if you're submitting an offer to like a REO, which is like a bank-owned property, well, sometimes they're really slow at getting back. So, I don't put a 24-hour timestamp on an offer for a bank owned, because I just know it's unrealistic. And so for that situation, I may put 2 to 3 days on there. Now, if it's a property that doesn't have multiple offers yet, but I do get the feeling that because of the market that we're in, that activity could be high and other offers could be coming, then I do want to put a shorter time frame and kind of put the pressure on them to, accept and review my offer before other people have a time to come in. So if I had to give you a standard, in just like a very like middle of the ground scenario, like 24 hours should be a decent time frame for you to submit an offer and expect, some communication back and hopefully have an agreement. Like 24 hours, you should be able to get the offer over, negotiate, come to terms, and get it signed. Like that's pretty realistic. You may shorten that again because of high intense situations where you're trying to get it done quickly, or you may lengthen it depending on case by case situation. Does that make sense, Joyce?
Yes, and also the time frame, when you tell the listing agent you're going to make an offer and then you give it to them, that's usually a pretty quick turnaround.
You mean once they have the offer, how quick they get back to you?
No, I mean, do you verbally tell them you're making an offer and then the paperwork shows up 6 hours later or something like that?
That depends on the agent and the skill of the agent. I mean, like me, I could tell a listing agent, hey, I'm going to submit an offer, and within an hour and a half, I can have an offer in their hands. Someone else that maybe, is not as comfortable going through that process, they might take time. I mean, but there could be so many different variables, Joyce. I mean, it's a great question, but there could be so many different variables that get in the way. Like, once you have multiple clients that you're dealing with, your client might say, hey, I want to make an offer, Joyce, but you have 2 other clients you got to meet with first to go show them houses, and then you'll be at the house later. So that's going to, again, extend the time for you to get the offer over to them. So yes, there's a lot of things to get in between, the time frame of you getting the offer done and into the agent. But obviously, you always want to try to make it as short as possible, because usually time is of the essence. So yes, I'm not giving you a straight answer. It's just because it just depends, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, great questions. Moving forward here. Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
are they obligated to provide a response? Suppose they chose someone else's offer. Are you going to hear back? Or are you just going to see the property change to pending?
So they're obligated to present the offers. It's like, you sometimes you may not hear back until you hear that you lost,
Well, that's what I mean.
So yeah, absolutely. So that's up to them. You usually if it's like you're the only offer there and you submit an offer, like usually you'll hear back. There's going to be a lot of communication. But if there's 6 offers, you don't hear nothing back, then usually you probably lost, and you're going to get a phone call or email saying, hey, unfortunately, we went with something else. So good question, Drew. Let's see here. What else? All right, so we talked about multiple offers. How are you going to handle that? But that's not really important for right now. Okay, so let me get to, I'm going to show you something else here. Let me see. What do I want? 1 second. Okay, so this is the buyer's processing checklist that we have in the office. This can be found in the Keller Williams folder in DocuSign when you're in your documents library, which again, if you don't know how to get to that, we can discuss that later. But this is what is expected to be in your file for compliance reasons. But the point of me bringing this up is I want to show you what you need to make an offer. Like what's like the bare minimum that you need to present an offer. So the first thing is the agreement of sale with all the addendums attached that you are using at that time. So you might have a appraisal contingency attached addendum. You might have a sale and settlement addendum. And some of these might be like Latin to you guys right now, and that's okay. I'm just throwing out some examples. But the agreement of sale, which is what we're talking about. The pre-approval letter, you're going to need a pre-approval letter if they are financing. If they're not financing, if they are paying cash, then you're going to need proof of funds. So usually that's in the form of like a bank letter or a bank statement showing that they have the funds. A lot of agents are also going to ask for a BFI. That stands for Buyer's Financial Information Document. That's just a document that kind of gives the listing agent an idea of how strong of a buyer you're working with financially. So it asks questions like, has your buyer, or not has your buyer, have you filed for bankruptcy in the last 7 years? Like speaking to the buyer, because the buyer is supposed to fill this out on their own. Like this is one of those documents that you're not allowed to touch by law. It's only by them only. So it's going to ask them, have you filed for bankruptcy in the last 7 years? Are you currently going through a divorce? Do you have child support liens against you? Are you getting funds for this sale from another source other than yourself? So it's all these different questions that the seller and a listing agent would want to know, because it may impact the ability of closing on the loan and the deal, depending on the yes or no to these questions. It'll also have an asset section as well, just wanting the buyer to disclose that they do have enough assets to close. There's a couple other sections, but for time's sake, I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm just trying to give you the gist of the idea of it. It's just again, a disclosure on finances for the buyer, just to make sure that they're strong enough to close. A signed estimate of buyer's closing cost. So you're going to want to call the lender as well when you know that you're going to make an offer, and you're going to tell the lender the property address that your buyer wants to offer on, and ask them to draw up a buyer's estimate of closing cost. All right. So that way your buyer can see, what the mortgage payment's going to be on that house at that price that they're going to offer, or even at just the list price. If you don't even know what price yet you're going to offer, just use the list price. Also, how much cash they're going to need, to close on the loan. And then you're going to want to have them sign that. The reason for that is you don't want to get halfway or 3/4 of the way through the deal and the lender say, hey, just so you know, just to remind you again, like, you need to bring $20,000 to the table. And your buyer's like, what? I didn't know that. Like, my agent didn't tell me that. Well, that having them sign it up front protects you, that like, look, here's proof that we showed you how much it's going to cost and you signed it. So you want to get that done. Seller's disclosure, signed and initialed by all parties. So like I said, the seller's disclosure should be given to you by the listing agent. It'll either be on the MLS already attached like we talked about. If it's not, reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, can you email me a seller's disclosure? All right. Consumer notice. Now this document should have been signed when you first started working with that client. Now, if you didn't get that done, at the last point is to at least get it signed before you're writing this offer, at least minimum. But you should have that, the consumer notice and this buyer agency contract right here. Those two things should be getting done when you first start working with the client. But again, if maybe you forgot, or maybe for some reason you just didn't do it, at least when you make an offer and you're putting Keller Williams Exton on that agreement of sale, and you're writing your name on that agreement of sale that you're representing the buyer, you need to have these representation documents done at that time. All right. Deposit money notice. So that's, and all, just so you know, all these forms are all PAR forms other than like a pre-approval letter that comes from the bank. But everything else is made a standard form from the state. So we have a library for all these. For those of you wondering, like, where are these? There's a library, PAR forms that, you guys should have access to. If you don't, like I said, just reach out to the coaching group and we'll talk about getting you access. But the deposit money notice is another one you need. Does anyone have any questions about these things? Now, Now, again, I'm not getting into addendums or anything like that. So there's other things that you could or could not be included, but this is kind of like basic, like what you would need to make an offer. All right. All right, perfect. Let's move on. So let's actually get to the offer, the agreement of sale, shall we? Let's get to the good stuff. All right. Let me bring that up here. Share.
Hey, Lewis, while you're doing that, is there a document that will teach us how to upload to .loop?
A document to teach you how to upload to .loop.
I mean, I read the top of that, and just as far as how to do.
I don't know if there's a document. There may be I'm pretty sure there should be a video or two. I'm not sure of a document, but
Okay.
what? Oh wait, did you say DocuSign or .loop?
Not DocuSign. At the top of that one, it said.
Oh
.loop.
yeah. So that checklist was made when we had .loop.
Got you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you can ignore that for now, as long as it's in DocuSign right now. You're fine.
Okay, great.
All
Good.
right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. All right. So now I'm in, my DocuSign room, and I'm going to just bring up a quick agreement of sale, and we're going to just kind of go over one real quick. All right. Let's just open this up. I know I'm not explaining this for those of you that are freaking out, like, Lewis, well, how do you get there and what are you doing? That's for another class, another time, but we can help you with that. But we're just getting straight to the document here. All right. Let's just, is there anyone to add on here? Probably add myself. Yeah, let's just add myself. All right. All right. As this is coming up, any other questions you guys have for me for right now, where we're at? No? All right. Here we go. Come on. Okay. So this is the agreement of sale. Like I said, this is that 13-page document that I talked about. So we're going to go through like the major sections here. So the first pages are like really kind of self-explanatory. So I'll go a little bit faster on this first page. So buyers, obviously that's going to be your buyers, their names. Sellers, the seller's information there. You can find that on Bright MLS. The buyer's mailing address, seller's mailing address there. So property. So property address, including the city. So, 123 Main Street, Westchester. We'll go right here on this line.
Lewis, I have a question.
Yes.
My buyer sold his home and he's in a rental agreement. So does that become the buyer's mailing address?
Yes, I would say wherever your mail is being directed now is what I would ask him. That's the address we'll put down.
Okay.
All right, good question. So you got the address there, zip code, municipality. So that's usually, the township or the borough. Again, that's listed in Bright, and it actually says municipality, and then it has the answer there. So that'd be the township or borough that it's in. The county, school district, tax ID, that's on the MLS as well. And then you can put the lot number there if you want. So all this property information, the source for that would be the MLS, the details page for that, okay? All right, buyer's relationship with the PA broker. So this is where we're gonna put our information. So the left side, at least my left was as I'm looking at it, is the broker information. So the brokerage is Keller Williams Exton, all right? The company license number, I don't memorize it, but you can just ask the office, the front desk. They have that license number available for you. So when you ask it for them, just write it somewhere that you'll always have it, like in your phone, or take a picture of it. Obviously, you know the office address, phone number. So if Keller Williams, if you're working with another agent on the other side that works for a different office than Keller Williams Exton, then you're going to put that the broker only represents the buyer and the buyer's agent. All right. Now, if you're working with, if me and Drew, we're both in the same office, I'm representing the seller, Drew's representing the buyer, we're both under Keller Williams Exton, that makes the brokerage a dual agent. So you're going to want to click dual agent for that case. Okay. Great. Over here is the licensee information. So this is where I would put my information because I'm the agent representing them. So Lewis Nixon, my license number, cell phone, yada, yada, yada. Put the phone number that they can reach you best on. So usually, like, I only put my cell phone number most of the time. Now, at Keller Williams Exton, we only work as designated agency in our office. So I'm a designated agent. That means I only represent the buyer only, just me. Drew doesn't represent my buyer in the office. Dan doesn't represent my buyer. Only me. The broker says only I, Lewis Nixon, represents the buyer as a licensee. That's why I'm designated. All right. Okay. So I would be dual, you know, if I was representing the seller and the buyer in that case. Now down here, you would get this information from the MLS. From, you know, it's listed in there what the listing company is and what the licensee's information is. So just do your best filling it out. You know, it's all there. Usually I don't fill out right away, like this part here, because I don't know, because not all offices work with designated agency. Some of them just will check the top where just all of the company licensees represent the seller. So instead of me choosing for them, I usually leave it blank, and then they either just check it off themselves when the offer is over to them, or they'll reply back and say, hey, I'm a designated agent as well. Can you know, check that box for me? But all of the listing agents information is on the MLS, so you could fill in for them as best you can. All right. By this date of the agreement, dated. This date should be the day that you're writing the offer and your buyer is going to sign the offer. That's what that date is. So if you're typing up the agreement now and your buyer is going to sign it today, then you're going to put June, whatever today's date is. Losing track of my days, but you guys understand. Purchase price. So that's self-explanatory. You know what the purchase price is. On this line here is where you're going to put it in a numerical way. And then here you're going to actually write it out. All right. Deposit. So your deposit here. So initial deposit within blank number of days, 5 if not specified. So if you don't put anything in here, it's 5 days for your deposit to be handed in. So that's 5 days after the offer is accepted, after the execution date. All right. If you can change this, obviously, to 5, like 6, 7, 8, whatever you need to. I would say most people leave it at 5. 5 is pretty standard. But if, again, ask your client and say, like, look, we have to hand in a deposit check if this offer is accepted. Like, are you going to be around to do that, to get a deposit check from? You know what I mean? Because, like, if he or she is away on vacation or something, and you know they're not going to be able to be back in time, like, then you might want to extend this a little bit. You might want to say, you know, give yourself 7 days. So just pay attention to the situation and make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. You can, yes, go ahead.
So I have a question in terms of, you know, you write the agreement date as blank. By the time the seller agrees to it, do you have to go in and actually change the agreement to that date, or you just see that on the contract it's signed, dated at a specific time?
No. So if your buyer writes an offer and presents it, and you guys negotiate back and forth, and then you guys come to an agreement,
Right.
you still keep that original date on
Mhm.
there, the original date that you wrote the offer. Now, if you have to write up whole new agreement of sale and your buyer is signing a whole new one again, you can put the new date at that point for the agreement. But a lot of times a lot of times your buyer, you're writing an agreement, you're handed it in, you negotiate back and forth once or twice, and then all they say is like, hey, just change this price and change settlement. So you just cross out this and cross out that. Well, everything else has stayed the same. He doesn't have to sign the whole thing again. So this date is still going to stay the same, the original date that he signed, and then he's just going to initial by the new changes. But if you're redoing a whole nother agreement, like 2 days later, you can do the new date here because he's redoing the entire thing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great, good question.
So Louis,
All right.
this is Joyce. So you can still have negotiations after you've submitted this, is what you're saying. It's not after it's all done. All your negotiations are done.
Correct. You submit this document as your initial offer, then it could go into negotiations at that point. Negotiations usually will happen verbally, or they'll happen via email or text. And so at that point, once you guys reach an agreement verbally or through email or text, then you'll revise this document and get it signed officially, and then it's a done deal.
And
Does
you're
that make
saving
sense?
all these documents in, you're saving all these envelopes basically in your DocuSign.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So this deposit, there's another deposit here. So you could do 2 different deposits. So the question would be, well, Louis, what type of situation would you do 2 different deposits? I usually do 2 separate deposits if I'm dealing with a buyer that maybe is a little light on cash. Like they don't have a lot of money. And in that case, I don't want to, let's just say like they only have, I don't know, $10,000, that they're going to be using for the purchase. Well, if we're going to do a deposit for, 5,000, let's say, like, and we put all of it up front. Well, I don't want, if the deal falls apart because of inspections, I don't want half of all of the money they have to be tied up in escrow with the other agent. So, because they might end that deal because of inspections, and they might say, hey, Louis, I like this one. Can we make an offer on this one? Well, now they're going to feel uncomfortable because they got $5,000 still tied up because, Coldwell Banker didn't release it yet. And now they're going to have $5,000 to work with to try to get this other offer going. So in that case, when they're, when cash is low like that, I'll just do $1,000 up front, and then I'll do $4,000 later after inspections. So that way the deal is more solid at that point, and the chances of it falling apart is slim to none. And so that way, if the deal did fall apart because of inspections, they only have $1,000 tied up at that time. We could still move forward with that other $9,000. They'll feel a lot better. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All righty. So a lot of times that second deposit right here, it says additional deposit within blank number of days after the execution date. I usually count the number of days for inspections. So we'll get to that part in inspections, but just to say inspections, the contingency for inspections, let's say is 20 days. Well, then I'll make this like day 21 or day 22, because, we have to be done inspections by that point. And so then, I'll just go ahead and put that date in there. That's just how I like to do it, just to make it clear. All right, let's move forward here. Seller assist. So this is where you'd put seller assist if your buyer is getting seller assist, or the seller is, helping provide money towards their closing costs. You'd put the dollar amount here, like say like, hey, we're asking for $5,000 from the seller towards our closing costs. You put $5,000 here. You can also do a percentage where you can say, hey, we're asking for 3% seller's assist. That's 3% of the purchase price. So you can put the percentage there. Now, seller assist, it could be another 10, 15-minute conversation for those that don't understand seller assist, which I'm happy to go over at some point. But just so for the sake of filling out an offer, this is where you would put the seller assist if you're using that. Settlement and possession. So this is where the settlement date goes. And just so you know here, it says settlement date is blank, you know, let's just say, I don't know, July 6th or before, if buyer and seller agree. So some people, like, you know, well, I would say some people, that's just, my point is that whatever settlement date you choose, you can always settle sooner if buyer and seller agree. Like if everything gets done and both parties are like, hey, let's just wrap this up now. Like you guys can do that. It doesn't stop you from doing that, okay? Moving on here. Oh, just so you know too, settlement, the location of settlement is the buyer's choice. All right, so the buyer chooses where they want to settle. The only rules around that though is it has to be in the county the property is in or in an adjacent county. So if they settle in Chester County, then they can have a settlement in Lancaster. They can have a settlement in obviously like Delaware County. So everything that's like it's touching all the other counties, they can have a settlement. But you can't like skip over a county. You know what I mean? So you can't go from Chester to Philadelphia County, unless I'm incorrect and they are touching. But I don't think they are. I could be wrong. But you just can't skip over it. But you can do it in adjacent county. All right.
I have a question about that. Regarding, for instance, the agreement I just did, I mean, these people are down in Lincoln University versus someone up here. You drag them up here, huh?
It's up to your buyer. It really is up to them. Like if a buyer is like, hey, you know, well, it's up to one or two things. But yes, the final decision is your buyer's, Drew. So if your buyer's like, hey, you know, we're going to really go into the property anyways after settlement, it'll be easier for us actually just to settle closer to the property. So then at that point, you could tell the listing agent, since his office is down there, and say, hey, do you mind if we just settle at your office? Because my buyers actually want to be in that area afterwards. And I'm sure he'll be happy because he don't have to drive. But if your buyer's like, hey, like, I don't mind, then you as the buyer's agent, I would probably just have the settlement at your own office. The reason is it's your home field, you know, like if something's wrong, you can run over to your computer, you can run over to here, your title, and then the other thing is your title company too. Like the title, if you're using a title company that's in your office, it's going to be easier on your title company if it's held at your office, other than your title company having to send someone out somewhere, which they will if they have to. But
all right, I don't believe we included that in the agreement of sale.
Included what?
The location.
No, it's what I'm telling you right now. It's already standard. It's written in there. So this, what I'm telling you now, you don't have to write it in there.
Okay,
you know, it already says the buyer chooses the title company. I mean, the location, and you choose it. It doesn't have to be written. They just choose it at whatever point they choose it. All right, great. Good question. All right, so here's that time of essence. Remember we talked about how long the offer is good for. So that goes right here. Written acceptance of all parties will be on or before this date. So like I said, if we did 24 hours, you know, we would go to tomorrow is what we're expecting the offer to be valid for. All right, that's where you'd put that date and time. If you do go over that time, like let's say you're negotiating and negotiations are going and it's still not done yet. Let me see here. Then you guys can still negotiate it out and then just go ahead and revise that number at that point. All right. So just change it before you guys all sign the offer is all you have to do. Okay. Zoning, 99% of the time, it's probably going to be residential. So just write residential in there. Okay. Fixtures and personal property. So this paragraph right here lists everything. Like if you can see, I think I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys. As you can see it in big letters, it says included. So this lists everything that is included in the sale already as a fixture. So, you know, like it says in here, dishwasher is already included in here. Like right here, it says the range or the oven is already included. So you don't have to list like dishwasher, range, or oven. It's already written in here. But the most common things that aren't written in here is a refrigerator, washer, and dryer. So those are not found in here. So if you do want those to be included as the buyer, then you want to write those here. But be specific when you do it, especially if a property has more than one refrigerator. You know, you want to say kitchen refrigerator to be included, because what will happen is they can have the $3,000 refrigerator, and then they have the piece of junk that in their garage, and then you just say, oh, refrigerator included. Then you do your final walkthrough right before settlement, and you notice the piece of junk was swapped out with the $3,000 refrigerator. I mean, if someone's going to be buying a refrigerator for your buyer that day, it might be you as the agent. So you make sure you're specific that, you know, kitchen refrigerator, basement refrigerator, you know, about as far as that. And then too, I mean, if you want to get real crazy with it, I mean, if it's in one of the pictures, it obviously saving that picture, it helps you identify like, hey, it shows it right here. This is the one that was in the kitchen. But yes, be specific. Let's see here. Yes.
I have a quick question. So it mentions, you know, like window treatments and things like that. If you are not including that, or your buyer says that they, or your seller does not want to include that, do you just, you know, draw a line through it there and then include it in the exclusions?
Good question. So if the seller, like, so if we're pivoting and we're thinking of it as a seller doesn't want it, or even if a buyer doesn't want it, this is a good point you're bringing up, Kristen. The section you would put it in is here in the excluded section. So anything listed in here that is not going to be with the sale can be excluded and put in here. You don't have to cross it out because this line will trump this pretty much. Another thing is that even if it's not on here, like let's say like there's like a huge gun safe in the basement, and your buyer is just worried that like the seller is going to try to, you know, pull a fast one and say, hey, there's no way I can get this out of here. Well, just write it here, like gun safe in basement to be excluded. So great question. Anything listed in here, or even if it's not listed in here, that you want to be excluded from the sale will be listed here. All right. Here is leased items. Most popular is propane tanks, to be honest with you. But sometimes solar panels too. Solar panels will be listed there. But it needs to be clear what on the property is leased and what isn't. So, all right. And usually the seller will provide that information, you know, so because you don't usually know as a buyer, like what's leased or not, but the seller and the listing agent will say, hey, make sure you write in here that the solar panels are leased so the buyer knows. All right. Moving in. Oh, stay logged in. Okay. Mortgage contingency. So here is where if your buyer is getting financing and them purchasing this property is dependent on them getting financing, then they're going to want to elect the mortgage contingency. If they don't need a mortgage, or if they're getting a mortgage, but they it's not contingent on them getting the mortgage, then you're going to waive it. So it's either if they're paying cash, you waive it, or if they're getting a mortgage, but even if they don't get the mortgage, like even if they like the mortgage, I don't know why that kicked me out. If the mortgage is declined, you would go ahead and still waive it because it's not contingent on a mortgage, if that makes sense. That was really weird. Give me 1 second. Does anybody have any? This is perfect time for questions if you have any.
So you're getting that information, Louis, from the mortgage company pretty much at this point? He's
Yes,
providing all that. Okay.
Yeah, the mortgage company is providing all this information on here. Correct. Good question. Or good statement, rather. Okay, so the mortgage loan amount, yes, you'll get, like Joyce said, that'll be provided to you from the lender. That estimate that you asked for, like it would say in there what the loan amount would be. The mortgage term, the type of mortgage, the loan to value ratio, so you know how much they're putting down for a down payment, that percentage. Mortgage lender, You know, are they working with, you know, guaranteed rate? Are they working with Quicken Loans? Whoever. Excuse me, the interest rate you'd put there. Here is where you put an interest rate spread. So like if they're quoted at 3%, let's say, this is where we would put the maximum interest rate that the buyer is willing to accept at that point. Usually, like, you know, if you're representing the buyer, like 0.5% is decent. So I'd put 3% to 3.5 here. And what that means is that, like, if the interest rate were to hike up above 3.5% and that affected the buyer's loan, then they could actually get out at that point. All right. So this is so as a listing agent, they want the spread to be big as possible. As a buyer's agent, you want it to be shorter for your buyer, obviously. So 0.5% is decent. Here is where you write what's called a mortgage approval date. This is the date that your buyer's lender will give what's called a mortgage approval letter. So it's a letter that says, hey, based on after we reviewed everything, like, you're approved on the loan officially. All right. There may be 1 or 2 conditions, meaning, like, you know, they might need to see 1 or 2 items from your buyer, but you still get that mortgage approval letter at that point. So this is the date that you're saying to the seller, we will deliver a mortgage approval by this date. That is important because this is one of the only places in the entire agreement of sale that if that date is not lived up to, the seller can actually exercise their right to terminate the agreement. So that's an important date to kind of make sure that you have correct. And how do you make sure you have it correct? You ask the lender, like, put them to be liable for that because they're the ones controlling getting that mortgage approval done in time. So don't, you know, put 5 days here and then hand it over to the lender, and the lender's like, what? Like, why wouldn't you ask me? Like, I can't get this done in 5 days. And now we have a situation. So ask them, hey, how long until you can get the mortgage approval letter? And then they'll say, hey, you know, as long as you give me like 2 to 3 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, then now you know what's safe to be put down here.
Louis, that's what I was asking about with all those people you have to check with before you can submit this. You know, you said you can turn something around in an hour and a half or 2 hours. And then I see all these people we have to contact. So that's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah. It seems like a lot, but it comes together. I mean, it seems like a lot once you're kind of looking at it for the first time, Joyce, but believe me, you'll notice. I'll be talking to you, Joyce, in another year or 2, and you'll be cranking them out in an hour and a half as well too. Trust me. Because sometimes you got to remember, you're communicating with a lot of these people the whole entire time anyways, because, you know, they talk to that lender to get their pre-approval already. You know, you might even tell that lender, like, hey, we're going to have to look at a house. This might be the one. So I'm going to have to text you if I need some information. So everyone that's really, really involved is kind of going to be available usually for communication wise. But that's a good point, Joyce, though, is that's why it's so important that you're partnered with a great lender and that you make your buyer understand how important it is to work with a good lender that you recommend. Because if they do want to make an offer and you do have some questions to ask, and, you know, they are working with, you know, Chase Bank, let's say, I'm not trying to beat up Chase, and it's not even just Chase, it's Wells Fargo, TD Bank, Quicken Loans, any of the big banks, any of them. If it's like Sunday at 7:30, I mean, it's going to be difficult to get in touch with that lender that, you know, was assigned to that file, you know? So if you're working with someone that you're used to working with, you and your client have their cell phone number and they live right here in Downingtown, like, you're going to get an answer. Like, you know, texting them, hey, we're about to write an offer. I got a quick question. Like 99% of the time, they're going to get back to you because they're here, they're local, you got their cell phone number. But again, when you're working with the big banks where you're going through all these different channels, you know, on 1-800 numbers and stuff like that, you might run into a situation outside of business hours that you can't get any help. So that's why it's important. All right, let's see here. All right, so this date here, it says 7 days the buyer will make a completed mortgage application. So if you don't think your buyer is going to be able to get a mortgage application done within a week, then you can extend that day. But I think 7 days is fine, to be honest with you. I mean, you could change it. If I were to change this, I would only change it to reflect the number of days for my inspections. So if I'm doing like 12 days for inspections, I might change this to 12 days. So that way my buyer is not forced to make a mortgage application before we even get through inspections, because a mortgage application costs money and so do inspections. So, you know, I'd rather have them only pay for one thing before they pay for another. But usually, again, you know, this is not like that big of a deal. But I just want to make you guys aware about it. All right. Because it only matters if the seller or the listing agent like calls up your lender to say, hey, did they make a mortgage application? Which not many listing agents go that far. Really good listing agent may, but most of them don't. But I just want you guys to be aware. This box right here gets filled in if you're working with FHA or VA loan. You'd put the purchase price in there, and you would have to check this box here as well. So if you're working with a conventional loan, you don't need to fill in any of this. That's why it says FHA, VA applicable, okay? Moving on. Status of water and sewer. Public water, public sewer. If it's on-site water, if it has a well, you check that. If it's an individual on-lot sewage system, you check this second one here. Okay. Okay, so next section is inspections. So this is where your buyer would have to elect or waive certain inspections that they're looking to do. So the first one is the home inspection. So the home inspection is where the home inspector would check the house from the roof to the basement pretty much. So they'll walk around the house entirely, and hopefully your buyer or yourself would be with them so they can point out and educate at that point. So that's the home inspection. As you can see here, it includes like, you know, swimming pools, hot tubs, spas, things like that. All that's included under the home inspection. All right. Now your home inspector may not inspect the pool, but if you elect this, you can have a pool person come out and look at it. You know, that's what I meant. All right. Wood infestation. So that covers like wood destroying insects like carpenter bees, termites, things like that. So if your buyer is going to do that inspection, they would elect it. If they're not, they're going to waive it. Oh, I thought I felt a question.
No, I had a question about that. So wood infestation, isn't that required by most lenders that inspection's completed?
No, the only one that requires a termite inspection is VA. So a VA loan is going to ask for that report. The other ones won't ask for it usually.
Okay, very good.
Yep, good question. All right.
I have another question about another one, the septic.
Drew, are you trying to get ahead of me?
I'm sorry, I'll wait.
We'll be right there. Deeds, restrictions, and zoning. So this gives the buyer the right to investigate easements, deeds, restrictions, the use of the property. So the only time like this would usually come into play is if like your client's buying a property and they want to see, hey, can I run a barber shop, you know, down the first level and then live upstairs? So that has to do with the zoning and the use of the property. So they might want to elect this to give them that time to investigate if they can have the barbershop in the lower level and live upstairs. Or like a historic property, if it seems like that you're dealing with a historic property that you don't know if you can make any adjustments to the property, that's something you might want to, you know, investigate. I would say, honestly, you know, me doing this for 8 years, it's like I've yet really to have a buyer that we've had to exercise this. But you may run into one, just know it's there, but most of the time you won't be doing anything with this. All right, so you'll waive it most of the time is what I'm getting to. Water, so this is where if it has a well, you're gonna wanna have the well looked at. Also, you can test the water with this inspection as well. So, you know, if you wanna test it for like bacteria and things like that, excuse me, that all falls within the water. If it's public water, it's not necessarily important to test it, but you still can test the water. You know, even if water's public, maybe it's not good drinkable water still, and you want to test it. That's up to you and the buyer, so you can still exercise that right. but most of the time it's going to be exercised for a well. All right. Radon, I'm sure everyone's familiar with what radon is. So if they're going to do a radon test, elect. If they're not, waive. All right, Drew, your time to shine.
Sorry, the question I had was, I just called about a septic inspection, and it's kind of a two-part deal. And they said they inspect it as it is on the property, and then they want it pumped, which becomes the homeowner's responsibility. And then they inspect it a second time. And so I just wasn't clear that the homeowner was aware of that expense, because I have to let them know it's out there at this point.
Yeah, good point. So they should be. Hold on
Okay.
a second here. Give me
I
one
think
second.
that's how I read it.
No. I think I believe you're right. I'm reading in here because I think it says specifically in here that at the seller's expense they will do that. Empty the individual on-lot sewage system and provide all water needed unless otherwise agreed. So if you're on the buyer side and you're having a septic test, then yes, like I said, be aware, like Drew is stating, that the seller is supposed to provide water if you need it for the septic test, number one. And number two, they need to have that pumped out, all at their expense. If they weren't aware of that, whose fault's that? That's their agent for not making them aware of what the agreement says. All right. So flip side, I know this is a buyer class, but if you're a listing agent, make sure that you are telling your clients as a seller that, hey, we're going to have to provide water and provide the pumping unless we, state otherwise, So sewer, private sewer, elect, waive for if you're not doing it. Property and flood insurance. This is just like, it's just added protection if you want it. I mean, it just says that the buyer can determine the insurability of the property. So, if you're concerned that the property wouldn't be able to be insured, then you would elect it. But, most cases, if there's nothing, like if it's not like in a floodplain or if it's not like about to fall over or anything like that, then you should have no problem getting property insurance. But this is just in case you're dealing with one of those properties that is in that category, that it is in a floodplain or it is maybe, very unsafe or whatever, and you're not sure if a property insurance company would actually insure it or not, then you would want to elect that. Otherwise, you would waive it.
Louis, wouldn't your mortgage company request that you have that done?
Absolutely. You are very smart, Joyce. I wasn't going to mention that because that's high level class right there. But since you brought it up, yes. So even if you do waive this, your mortgage company does require you to have homeowners insurance be purchased in order for you to get the loan. So if you were not able to get homeowners insurance, the domino effect would be you can't get the loan. So if you can't get the loan, now your mortgage contingency is in effect and you're protected that way anyways. So you kind of are already double protected on the insurance aspects because of what you just said, Joyce. The mortgage company requires it anyways. Property boundaries. If your client is going to survey the property or have the property surveyed, which never really happens in most cases, only in cases like if your buyer's purchasing a big piece of land and like there's no one has any clue where the property lines are, maybe they want to have a surveyor at that point. But your typical, purchase in a subdivision somewhere, your buyer's not paying $1,000 for a surveyor to come out and tell you where, the lines are, when you can obviously see your neighbor stops cutting the grass there and, that's the line pretty much probably. But in the case of if you need to do that, that's what you would do is here, okay? Lead-based paint. That is if you're dealing with a really old property before 1978, I would say. And, maybe it hasn't been touched since 1978 or before. And there's concerns if there's lead-based paint exposed, they can do a lead-based paint test if they would like. A lot of homes that are before 1978, but obviously they've been remodeled or redone, repainted a dozen times. A lot of times most buyers will not exercise this right on those type of properties. It's only if we feel as though there's lead-based paint exposed, like it hasn't been touched in all those years, pretty much. Here is blank for you to write in an inspection of your choice. Like if it's not listed here, you can write one here. The most common one would be stucco. So you can write, you know, invasive stucco inspection, and then click elect here. They would sign there, and now your buyer has the right to do a stucco inspection. Okay.
Louis, what about the use and occupancy certificate? Is that in here somewhere?
Yes, that's already pre-written in the agreement. So yes, you don't have to add that in here. That's already written in that the sellers has the responsibility of getting the UNO. Good question. Here's the number of days that you have to get the inspections done. All right, the default is 10, but you can change it to a little bit later. Like I would recommend you increasing the days if you're doing a lot of inspections. So if you're doing like septic, well, radon, termite, and the home inspection, you may want to do 12 to 14, 15 days because you might need a little time to kind of coordinate and schedule all those. If you're just doing, you know, home inspection and radon, then you can probably get it done in 10 days. So in the seller's eyes, the least number of days that you're putting down, the better. So don't ask for 20 days in a competitive situation because they're going to like, oh, this is not that great of an offer. They want 20 days. So again, the shorter the number of days, the better for the seller, but you got to make sure you have enough time to do it, of course. All right. Those number of days is for you to get the inspections done, and you have to submit a reply to inspection. So a response, the buyer's response to the inspections. And the responses can be, hey, we're satisfied with the inspections, we're going to move forward. Or, hey, we are scared of the house at this point and we don't want it no more and we want to terminate. Or, hey, we have some concerns, but we want to negotiate it with you. You know, so here's what we're asking for. So it's 3 different options: accept, terminate, or negotiate. Okay. There's a document for that, again, that we'll get into another time for that inspection, because next week, I think the 3rd week in the month is inspection week for us. So we'll go into inspections. And actually, now I'm glad I remember that because I was about to go into this more, but we'll save that for that week because that can get kind of long talking about the inspection deadlines. Title. So this says that within 7 days, your buyer will order title. Okay.
Hey, Louis, sorry.
Yes.
So if you do an inspection and the stucco then is like, you know, mold under the stucco, does it then become the seller's responsibility to put that in his disclosure report for the next buyer?
Yes. They should be either updating the disclosure or attaching that report that shows what's wrong to the stucco. So either or is fine. I've seen sellers do both, whether either, again, they would just update the seller's disclosure, hey, we have stucco issues, or they'll just take that report that states they have stucco issues and just attach that to the disclosure, and then the buyer can see that as well.
So they have to disclose it moving forward then, if they know there's a
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, next. The end of this document gets really simple.
Sorry,
So we're
can
gonna, yes.
Can I interject again about the title insurance timeline versus inspections?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I comprehended that because the inspections, you kind of want to do those first, right? And have the results in before you go ahead and buy the title insurance?
So to order title insurance, it says you have to order title insurance within 7 days. Ordering title insurance doesn't cost the buyer any money.
Okay.
So yeah, so they wouldn't be spending that and inspections if the inspections fell apart.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense. Yep, you're welcome. All right, so this here, if you're buying a property in the condo association, then you want to check that here. Oh man, you better not log me out. Condo association, you check that. HOA, you check that. So if it's in either one, association, condo or homeowners association, you would check those boxes, okay? And that would give you, like in this paragraph here, it talks about the seller having to, within 15 days, order HOA or condo docs and deliver them to your buyer. All right, and once your buyer gets those HOA or condo docs, your buyer has 5 days to review those documents and determine, oh, that's funny, and determine whether or not they are going to move forward with the purchase or they're not. So that's their decision at that point. but again, that's a protection that your buyer has. So if you're ever in a case, with a buyer and they're like, oh, well, we're hesitant to make an offer because we don't know how strict the HOA is. Well, now you can tell them and say, hey, well, just so you know, like you're protected, that you'll have the opportunity to review the HOA rules and regs before you go to settlement. If you don't like what it says, then you can back out at that point if you wish. Okay. All right, let me get down to the point here where we're at. Any questions so far? We're getting to the end. No? Okay, good. Let's see. Okay, that's where we were. All right. The other important thing I want you to know is paragraph 26C. Here, it has a default number of days is 180 days. So this says, like, if there is a dispute over the entitlement of deposit money that is unresolved after 180 days after settlement, then the seller has to give it release the deposit money, or the broker has to release the deposit money. Well, 180 days is a long time. So I usually change this if I'm working with the buyer to like 30 days, 14 days, something a lot shorter. That, that way if there is the dispute over deposit money is not resolved or no action is taken, that once 30 days hits, we need to get that kicked out. Now, it's different if action was taken and they presented to the broker that they want to go to mediation, or they're have a lawsuit or something like that, then that wipes out this number of days. But this is only if deposit money is sitting there because there's a dispute and there's no action being taken. Well, after 30 days, it needs to be released. But Dave Ash, like I said, he'll get into more the legal aspect of that type of a scenario, but hopefully you're never in that scenario. 719, line 719, paragraph 26G, you check this box if you're working with a buyer. This limits the seller to coming after the buyer for more than deposit money in this agreement. So you always want to check this box when you're working with a buyer. That way the seller's not trying to get their Lamborghini or something. It's just the deposit money at that point. As a seller, you'd like it if that's not checked, if you're representing the seller. All right, last page. So here, special clauses. This is where you would check mark anything that you want to be attached to the agreement. So like, appraisal contingency addendum, if they have to sell another property before they buy this property they're offering on, there's these addendums. If there's an addendum that's not listed, you can write the addendum in and then check the box. So like a price escalation addendum, which again, we'll talk about at another time, you could write that in and then check the box. All right. Additional terms, if there's anything additional that you would need to write that there's no other place for it, you'd write it in here. Like for instance, like a home warranty, seller at seller's expense to purchase a 1-year home warranty for the buyer. You'd write that sentence in here. Okay. Now, what I would say is don't get in the habit of writing like on your own a whole bunch of stuff in here. Our broker, is very clear that, we're not attorneys. So we don't want to just start drafting up our own, verbiages about different things. If it's something very short and sweet, like a home warranty, write it out. You can show it to me. If it's really detailed, we'll run it past the broker. But if it's very detailed, the broker is going to say you need to have your client needs to have an attorney draw something up for them in that case. So we want to keep it short and sweet for us. Okay. And then initials, and that is it. So now, after the offer is done and submitted to the listing agent, usually you submit by email. So you'll attach the offer to the email. So those documents that I showed you on that list, you'll attach all those documents to an email and submit it to the listing agent. When you send that email, I'm gonna click stop share. When you send that email, make sure in the email, what I usually do in the email is this, is that, sometimes I'll highlight some of the major points of the offer. Like if there's great things that I feel is really great about the terms I wrote in there for the buyer, sometimes I want to make sure that the listing agent is understanding that and they're communicating that to their seller the right way. You know what I mean? Like, because we might think like it's amazing, that we are putting, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 down as a deposit. The listing agent might just kind of skim over it and think it's normal. Well, I want to highlight that and say, hey, here's the highlights of my offer. My buyer has put above and beyond the standard deposit at $30,000, or whatever that is. So I highlight the major terms usually in the body of the email is what I do. You don't have to do that. It's not a requirement. I'm just sharing what I do. The other thing is, make sure you put in the email too that for them to please confirm receipt of the offer. You want the agent to email back, I got the offer. So now you have proof that they received it. You don't want to hear 2 days, call 2 days later, say, hey, I haven't heard anything from you. And the listing agent is like, oh, I don't think I ever got your email for the offer. We went with another offer. So you want to make sure they confirm some type of way that the offer is received. Okay. Also, I always usually put too, if they can reply, giving an expectation of when we'll hear back from the seller too. Because I know my buyers are always going to be anxious usually about that. And so if the listing agent replies back and they say, hey, receive the offer, I'll probably be presenting a little bit later around 8:30. So you'll hear from me before the night's over. Then I can tell that to my client and they can know that, like, all right, we're going to wait up to hear back. But if they're like, hey, probably not going to get to it tonight, the seller is working overnight, I got to wait until the morning, then I can tell my clients, like, look, get some rest, go to sleep. We're not going to hear anything tonight. Don't be freaking out about it tonight. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So your job is to always kind of give expectations to your client, to make them at ease as much as possible. Okay. So after you submit that offer to them via email, then it's just a matter of, just waiting. If you don't hear back from the listing agent within like the time frame he or she says that they're going to get back to you, what do? Reach out to them. All right. You're not bugging them. Like, believe me, when I was a newer agent, like I used to, and that's like my personality. Like, I don't like to bug people. And so like, I used to not want to bug them, but then, you realize like someone's depending on you as the agent, to do a good job and to, do the best you can to get them the house. And so you got to put the whole, I'm annoying someone or bugging someone out the door, and just do what's best for your client. And so bug them is what I'm saying. Annoy them, and call them. Hey, and you said that you were submitting or presenting the offer at 12 o'clock, and it's 1:30. I just wanted to see if you got an answer. And what I usually always do, I try to make light about it, and I try to put the obvious out there. So I'll tell them like, hey, I know I'm annoying and I'm bugging you, but hopefully you got a great answer for me so we can work together. So just keep it light and fun. But yes, follow up with them if you don't hear anything. All right. I'm trying to think, is there any other questions you guys can think of as far as getting offer together, writing that agreement of sale, and getting it submitted that I haven't answered before we wrap up for today? Nothing?
Wait, I have one. It's Joyce. I just want to see the buyer's estimated closing costs. That's done in conjunction with the mortgage company, correct?
Yes. Now I recommend, to empower yourselves to learn how to do your own closing costs. So you can do closing costs in Bright MLS. When you're on the Bright MLS, like when you're looking at a listing, there's a B sign with a money symbol, like a little B with a money green symbol. You click on that, it'll pull up like a platform to kind of enter in the numbers for your own estimated closing costs. And it's actually pretty simple. Like, they do a lot of the calculations and numbers automatically for you. You just got to put in some of the variables like price, settlement date, the type of mortgage. So I recommend you learn how to do that. So that way, if you are in a bind where you can't get in touch with the listing agent and your buyer is really leaning on you to give them some idea as far as cost, then you can do that on your own. All right. But if you can, I like to lean on the lender because they're the professionals and they're the one controlling the money. So I want to go by their numbers if possible at that point. Good question, Joyce. Anything else before we get wrapped up? No? Awesome. Well, hey, I apologize. I know it's a little longer than I planned to do it, but that agreement is obviously long. So my suggestions to you guys as agents is to, practice writing them. So if you guys ever want to just pick up a random property and say, hey, Lewis, do you mind if I just write an agreement you know, a fake agreement of sale, I can give you a fake scenario, write it up, send it to me, and then I'll, you know, mark it up like a teacher and teach you, you know, which ones you did right, what you did wrong. So I always tell people it's better to practice with no money on the line than to practice when the real thing is happening. So please use me in that regards. Other than that, next week we're doing seller. So Monday, we're going to be doing the listing presentation. And then on Friday, we're going to be looking at the agreement sale from the seller's eyes, because from the seller's eyes, you're not filling in the agreement. You're reviewing like multiple offers and you want to see, okay, which one is better? How can I explain this to my seller to help them make the best decision on what offer to move forward with? So we'll kind of be looking at that in that perspective. Okay. Have a good weekend, guys. See ya.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, Louis.
Bye.